Did you know that some Bantu tribes in East Africa have thin Eurocentric noses? Other Bantus in South Africa are mostly light-skinned, have monolith eyes without Asian admixture, and the majority of Bantus in Madagascar look Blasian. This is not a coincidence, as this group is the most diverse branch of the Niger-Congo lineage due to its range being the widest than any other groups in Africa. They are the Aryans of Africa, made for expansion and dominating lands as far as the eyes could see. But why? This is the story of the Abantu, Wabantu, aka Bantu people. To understand this, we first need to answer a simple question. Who are the Bantu people? The Bantus are not a single tribe or ethnicity, but a massive ethno-linguistic cultural grouping that belong to the larger Niger-Congo lineage. They are connected by related language, common shared ancestry, and similar cultural roots. Scientists believe that the ancestors of Bantu-speaking people diverged from other Niger-Congo populations, such as the Benue-Congo group, at around 4,500 to 1,500 years ago, somewhere near the borderland savannas of modern-day Cameroon and Nigeria. This region is often described as the ancestral Bantu homeland, a place of forests, rivers, and fertile lands where early communities lived by farming, fishing, and small-scale animal keeping. Life in this homeland shaped what will later become one of the greatest population movements in human history. These early Bantu communities were not just surviving, they were innovating. They developed agriculture, growing crops like yams and oil palms, and they began using iron tools, which gave them a powerful advantage, as iron axes could clear forests faster, iron hoes could farm lands more efficiently, and iron weapons could defend communities. These technologies would become the important engines of their expansion. The expansion, known as the Bantu expansion, began around 3 to 4,000 years ago and unfolded in two major streams. The first was the Western Stream, often called the rainforest route. This wave moved slowly through the dense Congo rainforest. It was not an easy journey. The forest was thick, humid, and full of challenges, but the Bantu adapted. They followed river systems, clearing land where possible, establishing small settlements, and gradually pushing deeper into Central Africa. Their knowledge of agriculture allowed them to create stable communities even in difficult environment, and over time, they interacted with indigenous hunter-gatherer groups, often called as the pygmy populations, leading to cultural exchange and some genetic mixing. The second stream was the Eastern route, moving towards the Great Lakes region of East Africa. This path offered a different environment, open plains, fertile soils, and access to larger bodies of water. Here, Bantu-speaking groups encountered new ecological opportunities. This region became a turning point, often described as an Iron Age pivot. Iron technology spread more widely, agriculture expanded to include grains like sorghum and millet, and cattle keeping became more important. These changes allowed populations to grow faster and settlements to become larger and more complex. From this Great Lakes region, the expansion did not stop. It pushed further south in what can be described as the final phase of the Bantu migration. But before I get into that, I have an important announcement. This video is just an introduction to this great lineage, but in my book, World Encyclopedia of African People, I dove much deeper. Not only did I talk about the Bantu people and its diverse ethnicities, but also the Niger-Congo lineage in which this group diverged from, plus all other African lineages from the oldest to the youngest, and also to the groups that emerged during the Middle Ages, colonial era, and also the global Afro-derived diaspora. In each chapter, I explored their genetic and ancestral backgrounds, histories and migration, geographical distribution, phenotypic traits, languages and communication, traditional lifestyles and economies, cultural traits and customs, modern identity and diaspora, and much, much more to each and every African ethnic group. It's an eye-opening read full of knowledge and one of the best ways to discover your African brethren. The book is available on Amazon and is the best way to support my channel. The link and more details are in description. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the video. Madagascar. Another movement went through the central interior, spreading into the vast landscapes of southern Africa. These journeys were not simple. Bantu groups faced environmental barriers like deserts, flies that affected cattle, and regions already occupied by indigenous populations. But over time, they adapted, split into smaller groups, and continued reproducing and moving. The driving force behind this general Bantu expansion were powerful and practical. Agriculture allowed Bantu communities to produce stable food supplies, supporting larger populations. Iron metallurgy gave them tools and weapons that improved efficiency and survival. Later, cattle pastoralism added another layer of economic strength. It is also important to understand the context of the lands they entered. Many of the indigenous populations they encountered were either hunter-gatherers or pastoralists, groups that typically maintained smaller population sizes. This meant that large areas of the continent were sparsely populated, creating spaces for expanding agricultural communities to settle and grow. Plus, they require small area to support a large population, which contrasts with hunter-gatherers and pastoralist lifestyles, which requires a larger territory to support a large population. As Bantu-speaking population spread across such a vast area, they did not remain the same. Over time, they diversified into hundreds of ethnic groups, shaped by geography, climate, and interaction with indigenous people. Starting with the Western Stream, we see the emergence of the central Bantu groups. These include people such as the Kuba, Shonge, Mbala, Boma, Ngala, and Teke groups. In the same region, there are also central Bantu communities with stronger admixture from the African pygmies. They include groups like the Mbenga, Benjele, Mongo, Luba, Tetela, Bembe, Mboshi, Suku, Yaka, Lunda, and Chokwe. These groups produce two phenotypes. One is called the Congolicid phenotype, which is found among Central Bantu proper groups, and the Bambuto Congolicid, a blended phenotype of Congolicid and Western Bambutid. Further west, Western Bantu groups develop along the Atlantic coast and nearby regions. These include the Bakongo, as well as groups like the Vili, Yombe, Kota, Sira, Teke, Ndoe, and the Budi. In these regions, there are also mixed Bantu pygmy communities such as the Fang, Beti, Bulu, Basa, Nzebi, Sogo, Puno, and Miene. These groups also come in two phenotypes: the West Congolicid, which is found among Western Bantu proper, and Western Congolid Bamboti, found among the blended groups. Turning to the Eastern Stream, the diversity becomes even more visible. In the Great Lakes region, we find groups such as the Baganda, Banyoro, Batoro, Banyankole, Bakiga, Banyarwanda, Burundi, and Haya. These societies often develop more centralized political systems and strong agricultural traditions. Phenotypically, they possess the North Bantuid phenotype. Moving into the highlands of Kenya and northern Tanzania, we find Bantu groups influenced by local Cushitic population, including Mount Kenya Bantus such as the Kikuyu, Kamba, Embu, Meru, and Tanzanian Bantus like the Tharaga, Chaga, Pare, and Shamba, as well as the coastal Kenyan Bantus such as the Taita and Taveta. Phenotypically, they possess a phenotype called Bantu Hamitic. It's a blend of North Bantuid base with Central Ethiopid influences. And there are also Bantu-speaking groups that have interacted closely with Nilotic populations, leading to shared cultural traits. These include the Basoga of Busoga, the Haya of northwestern Tanzania, and other Tanzanian groups like the Sukuma, Nyamwezi, Zinza, Ha, and Gogo. They also possess a blended phenotype known as Nilo-Bantuid, which is a mix of North Bantuid base with Nilotic influences. Along the Swahili coast, the Swahili Bantu emerged, known as the Waswahili. They include communities such as Amu, Shela, Vumba, Fundi, Mvita, Jomvu, Kilifi, Mtwapa, Pate, Shaka, Faza, Bajuni, Bida, and Katwa. These coastal societies were shaped by trade across Indian Ocean, blending African roots with influences from Arabia, Persia, India, and beyond. Phenotypically, they possess a phenotype known as Swahili. It has a dominant North Bantuid base with Ethiopiid, Arabid, and Yemenid influences. And as the expansion reached southern Africa, new forms of diversity appeared. Southern Bantu groups include the Zulu, Swazi, Baka, Kanyama, Makua, Lomwe, Sena, Ndau, Tonga, Chewa, Yao, Tumbuka, Kalanga, Ronga, Hemba, and Ovibundo, producing a stable phenotype known as South Bantuid. In this region, interaction with the aboriginal Khoisan population became more significant, as some groups such as the Fengu, Mpondo, and Chopi, as well as Tswana, Tsonga, Ndebele, and Herero show moderate levels of Khoisan ancestry, producing two blended phenotypes with heavy South Bantuid base with minor Khoisanid. They include Chopi Tswana and Fengu Pondo phenotypes, and others like the Xhosa, Sotho, Venda, and certain Shona clans show higher levels of Khoisan ancestry, reflecting deeper admixture with the indigenous people of southern Africa, producing a balanced blended phenotype known as Khoisan. Finally, there is a unique case in Madagascar, the Malagasi people, who are genetically connected in part of the Bantu population due to their Bantu ancestry, but linguistically they speak an Austronesian language linked to people from Southeast Asia. This makes them one of the most fascinating examples of cultural and genetic blending in the world, producing a unique Malagasy Blasian phenotype known as the Malagasi, the only stabilized Blasian phenotype in the world. In the end, the story of the Bantu people is not just a story of movement, but of transformation. From a small homeland in West Central Africa, they spread across most of the continent, shaping languages, cultures, and societies along the way. That's it for today's video. If you want to learn more, check out my previous video about the origins of the Niger-Congo lineages. And if you want to dig deeper, check out my book which is available on Amazon. And as always, stay curious, stay smart, and thank you very much for watching.